Turn conflict into connection. 1. Pause before you react. You ever watch a cowboy break a green horse? That horse is wild, died, snorting, muscles bunched like a coiled spring. First time he feels a saddle cinch tight around his belly, he explodes. Kicks, bucks, jumps sideways like a spooked deer. That cowboy's got two choices in that moment. He can jerk back hard on the reins, pull against every ounce of that horse's fire, and most likely make the explosion worse. Or he can sit deep in the saddle, breathe steady, keep his hands gentle, and give that animal just enough rein to feel like he's not trapped. One of those choices calms the storm, the other feeds it. People are no different. When conflict hits, our first instinct is to react fast. Somebody throws words like punches, and our pride wants to swing back. Maybe it's your boss snapping at you for something you didn't do. Maybe it's your spouse saying something that cuts deeper than they realize. Maybe it's a stranger flipping you off in traffic. The moment you feel attacked, you feel that fire rising, and 9 times out of 10, the first words that want to come out of your mouth are the ones you'll regret later. That's why the pause matters. Pausing doesn't mean you're weak. Pausing doesn't mean you don't know what to say. Pausing means you've decided not to let someone else's storm decide the weather inside you. It means you're taking the reins instead of letting the wild horse drag you through the dirt. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, pausing is hard, real hard. It takes more strength to hold your tongue for 5 seconds than it does to let it fly. But here's the truth, those 5 seconds can save 5 hours of fighting, or 5 days of silence, or 5 years of bitterness. I've seen it in marriages. A husband comes home tired, worn out, and the first thing out of his wife's mouth is a sharp word about something he forgot. He can either snap back and turn that kitchen into a battlefield, or he can pause, breathe, and remind himself, she's not my enemy. She's just tired too. That pause doesn't solve every problem, but it keeps the night from going downhill fast. I've seen it in workplaces. A boss calls out an employee unfairly. The employee wants to bite back, wants to prove the boss wrong in front of everybody, but the one who pauses, who swallows pride long enough to answer calmly, ends up gaining respect, while the hothead just looks foolish. The pause gives you space to choose, and in that space, wisdom shows up. Here's another thing. Pausing doesn't just protect you, it protects the other person, too. Folks don't always mean to say things the way they come out. Sometimes people are hurting, and it leaks out sideways as anger. If you react fast, you're throwing fuel on their fire. If you pause, you give them a chance to realize, maybe I came on too strong. Think about it like this: ever tried to light a fire on a windy day? That flame will jump quick and catch everything around it if you're not careful. Words are the same. If you strike too fast, you don't control where the fire spreads. But if you wait for the wind to die down, you can place that spark where it belongs. So here's my challenge to you. Next time conflict comes, and it will practice the pause, count to 5 if you have to. Take a sip of water, look away for a second, do whatever it takes to slow yourself down. Then, and only then, decide how to answer. Because here's the secret. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. The strongest person in the room is the one who can stand in the middle of the storm and not be shaken. That's what the pause does. It doesn't just change the conflict. It changes you. It turns you from a reactor into a leader, from a fighter into a builder, from someone who fuels the fire to someone who can calm it. So don't be afraid of the pause. Learn to use it, because in that pause, you just might find the difference between a broken relationship and a stronger one. 2. Listen to understand, not to defend. I once rode fence line with an old ranch hand, tough as rawhide, quiet as the prairie at dawn. He didn't say much, but when he did, folks listened. One day I asked him why people seemed to respect him so much, even when he rarely spoke. He just smiled and said, "Son, most folks don't need your answer near as much as they need your ears." That line stuck with me. See, when conflict shows up, most of us don't really listen. We hear the words, sure, but we're busy sharpening our reply before the other person's even finished. Our ears are open, but our mind's already building a wall. We don't listen to understand, we listen to reload. That's where everything goes sideways. Think about the last time you were in an argument. Maybe it was with your spouse, maybe a coworker, maybe your teenager slamming their bedroom door. They start talking, and you already feel your defenses coming up like a cowboy pulling up his bandana before a dust storm. You're not really catching their meaning, you're just waiting for your turn to swing back. And when both sides do that, nobody wins. 2 people talking, 0 people listening. That's not communication. That's just noise. Listening to understand is different. It's laying down your weapons for a moment. It's stepping into the other person's boots, even if just for a mile, and asking yourself, what's driving their words? What are they really trying to say? Most folks don't fight because they want to fight. They fight because they don't feel heard. I've seen hardened cowboys soften when someone finally listened to the story behind their anger. I've seen wives melt into tears when their husband stopped defending himself long enough to say, "I hear you. That must have hurt." I've seen kids straighten up when a parent looked them in the eye and said, "Tell me more. Help me understand." That's the power of listening. Now, listening doesn't mean you agree with everything. That's where people get mixed up. You can understand someone without signing off on their opinion. Listening doesn't equal surrender, it equals respect. And respect is the bridge that turns conflict into connection. Here's the truth. When you stop defending and start listening, you change the whole temperature of the room. Instead of 2 rams butting heads, it's 2 people working out a problem. You can almost feel the air shift. Let me tell you something about cattle. When they're spooked, they run wild. But if you stand calm, steady, quiet, they'll stop running and start watching you. People are the same way. If you answer anger with anger, they keep charging. But if you quiet down and give them your ears, they slow down, they settle. Sometimes they even surprise themselves with what comes out when someone finally listens. So how do you do it? How do you listen to understand? First, stop planning your comeback while they're still talking. Just shut that inner lawyer down. Second, reflect back what you heard. Say something like, "So what I hear you saying is you feel left out?" That one simple step shows them you care enough to get it right. Third, ask a question instead of dropping a defense. Questions open doors. Defenses slam them shut. Here's the part folks miss. Listening like this doesn't just help them, it helps you. When you truly understand where someone's coming from, the conflict shrinks. It's not a mountain anymore, it's a hill. Sometimes you realize the fight wasn't even about what you thought, and sometimes just knowing their heart changes yours. I'll be honest, it ain't easy. It's easier to bark back. It's easier to throw up your shield and protect your pride, but easy doesn't build strong relationships. Listening does. So next time you're in a dust-up, don't listen like a lawyer building a case. Listen like a friend trying to understand. Even if you don't agree, you'll walk away with respect instead of regret. And remember what that old ranch hand told me. Most folks don't need your answer near as much as they need your ears. That's how you turn conflict into connection, one listening heart at a time. 3. Shift from me vs. you to us vs. the problem. I've seen plenty of fistfights in my day. And if you stand back far enough, it's always the same picture, 2 people locked in, red-faced, fists swinging, both convinced the other one's the enemy. But here's the funny thing, 9 times out of 10, it wasn't really about them. It was about some problem bigger than both of them, pride, money, misunderstanding, jealousy, but they never got to the root because they were too busy swinging at each other instead of tackling the real issue. That's how most conflict goes. We make the other person the problem instead of facing the problem with the other person. And when you fight each other, everybody loses. I'll tell you a story. A neighbor of mine had a section of fence that kept breaking. Every time it rained hard, the water would wash out a low spot, and the cattle would find the hole. He and his boy would argue every time it happened. The boy said the fence posts weren't deep enough. The father said the boy didn't pack the dirt right. They'd get red in the face, yelling at each other while the cows wandered off. One day I rode by and saw the whole scene. Instead of fixing the problem, they were fighting about whose fault it was. So I told them plain, that hole in the fence don't care whose fault it is. You can either stand here fighting each other, or you can grab some rock and fix the hole together. But until you do, those cows are gone. That's life in a nutshell. The problem ain't usually the person across from you. The problem is the hole in the fence, and until you both turn shoulder to shoulder and face the problem, you'll keep losing the cattle. See, when you make conflict into me versus you, pride runs the show. Pride says, I gotta win, I gotta prove you wrong, I gotta come out on top. But when you shift to us versus the problem, pride steps back and teamwork steps in. It's no longer about who's right, it's about what's right. And here's the kicker. Most people aren't your enemy. Your spouse, not your enemy. Your kids, not your enemy. Your coworkers, not your enemy. The enemy is the issue, the misunderstanding, the pressure, the wound, the fear. If you can get on the same side of the table and stare at the problem together, you'll realize you've been wasting energy fighting the wrong battle. It takes humility to make that shift. It means saying, I care more about fixing this than about being right. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the medicine that heals. Think about a ranch crew working cattle. If two cowboys argue over whose rope work caused the mess, the herd keeps scattering. But if they shut their mouths, grab their ropes, and work together, the herd gets gathered quick. The fight wasn't against each other, it was against chaos. Same with your conflicts. The fight ain't against the person, it's against the problem. So how do you make the shift? First, change your words. Instead of you always, or you never, try we've got a problem. That simple word we changes the tone. Second, focus on solutions, not blame. Third, remind yourself, if this person's in my life, they matter more than the fight. You know what I've noticed, when people finally get shoulder to shoulder against the problem, something changes inside them. They remember they're on the same team, and once you remember that, connection grows where conflict used to be. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes people do act like the enemy. Sometimes folks are stubborn, cruel, or selfish. But even then, if you fight the problem instead of the person, you keep your dignity. You don't get dragged into the mud of hate. You stay steady, calm, and clear-headed, and that gives you the best shot at real resolution. So the next time conflict comes, picture that hole in the fence. You can waste your breath arguing about whose fault it is, or you can both grab a shovel and fix it. At the end of the day, relationships are worth more than winning, and the only way to protect them is to remember, it's not me versus you. It's us versus the problem. 4. Validate the other person's feelings back. When I was a young hand, I thought being tough meant keeping your feelings locked up. You didn't talk about him, you didn't show him, and you sure didn't acknowledge anybody else's. That was soft, at least that's what I thought, but life has a way of sanding the edges off a man's thinking. I remember one night around a branding fire, an older cowboy, gray in his beard and slow in his step, was talking with a younger fella who was worked up about something at home. The young man was spilling his guts, angry, hurt, confused. I expected the old-timer to laugh it off or tell him to toughen up. Instead, he just nodded slow and said, "Sounds like that cut you deep." That was it. Just a simple acknowledgement, and I swear the young man's shoulders dropped 10 pounds of weight right there. He didn't need advice, he didn't need fixing. He just needed someone to see his hurt and say, "I get it." That's what validation does. See, most of us think conflict gets solved with answers, but more often than not, conflict gets solved with understanding, and understanding starts with validation. Now let's clear this up. Validation doesn't mean you agree with everything. It doesn't mean you're signing your name at the bottom of their feelings like a legal contract. It just means you're saying, "I see you, I hear you, your feelings matter, People fight so hard in conflict because they feel invisible. They feel like their pain, their frustration, their fear doesn't count. And when someone feels dismissed, they'll keep raising their voice until someone finally notices. Validation is how you lower that volume without raising your own. Think about it like handling a skittish colt. If you march in loud, rope swinging, acting like his fear ain't real, he'll fight you tooth and nail. But if you move gentle, steady, acknowledging that fear with calm hands, the colt starts to settle. Same with people. If you bulldoze over their feelings, they fight harder. If you nod, listen, and say, "I get why you feel that way," you calm the storm. I've seen marriages saved by this simple act. A wife says, "I feel like you don't notice me anymore." The husband's first instinct is to defend. That's not true. I work hard, I do this, I do that. But defense just widens the gap. Now she feels unheard on top of feeling unnoticed. But if he pauses and says, "I hear you. I can see why you'd feel that way," the fire starts to die down. That one line doesn't fix everything, but it builds a bridge where there was a wall. Same goes at work. Your coworker complains, "I'm overwhelmed," and nobody cares. If you jump in with, "Well, we're all overwhelmed," you've just dismissed them. But if you say, "Man, I can tell this is wearing on you," that's rough. You've given them what they really wanted: acknowledgement. Here's the truth. People don't always need solutions first. They need validation first. Once they feel seen, then they're open to solutions. But if you skip validation and go straight to fixing, they'll dig in their heels. Now, some folks will say, "That sounds like coddling." No, sir. Coddling is when you excuse bad behavior. Validation is when you respect feelings, even if you don't agree with the behavior. It's the difference between saying, "I understand you're angry," and saying, "It's fine that you threw a chair." One respects the person, the other excuses the action. Don't mix the two up. Validation takes humility. It means setting aside your need to be right long enough to honor their need to be heard. But when you do, you give them something priceless: dignity, and dignity is the soil where real connection grows. So next time you're in conflict, instead of firing back with defense, try validation. Say things like, "I can see why you'd feel that way. That must have been hard. I get it. That sounds frustrating. It won't cost you pride, but it'll save you peace." At the end of the day, people don't want perfect answers. They want to know their heart matters, and if you can give them that, you turn conflict into something far better: connection. 5. Lead with calm, not chaos. I once watched a greenhorn try to push cattle down a chute. He came in hot, yelling, waving his arms, slapping the fence with his rope. Those cows scattered like quail in a cornfield, dust flying, hooves pounding, chaos everywhere. He thought more noise meant more control, but all he did was raise the panic. Then the old hand stepped in, didn't say a word, just walked slow, steady, eyes calm, movements easy. Those same cows that bolted at all that yelling suddenly started moving right where he wanted them. No whip cracking, no shouting, just calm leadership. That's how conflict works too. When tempers flare, our instinct is to match the storm. Someone raises their voice, so we raise ours higher. Someone throws sharp words, so we throw sharper ones back. But all that does is scatter the herd. The louder the chaos, the less anybody listens. Calm is what carries weight. See, calm is not weakness. Calm doesn't mean you're rolling over or ignoring the problem. Calm is strength under control. It's the difference between a wildfire and a campfire. One destroys, the other warms. Think about it. Who do people follow in a storm? Not the loudest voice, not the angriest shouter. They follow the one who's steady, the one who isn't rattled by the wind. Calm draws people in. Chaos pushes them away. Now, I know what you're thinking: easier said than done. And you're right, staying calm in conflict takes discipline. It takes swallowing pride when everything in you wants to bite back. But the payoff is worth it. Calm changes the whole atmosphere of the room. I've seen it happen. 2 coworkers were nose to nose in a heated argument, ready to tear each other apart. A third man stepped in, spoke quiet, even-toned, like a river on a still day. Within minutes, the shouting dropped, the tension broke, and before long, they were working through the problem instead of throwing each other under the wagon. That one calm presence shifted everything. Here's the truth: emotions are contagious. If you walk into a room carrying chaos, everybody catches it. If you walk in carrying calm, folks start to settle. It's like a horse when you're nervous. The horse feels it and spooks. But if you're calm, steady on the reins, that horse calms down too. So how do you lead with calm? First, slow yourself down. When someone comes at you hot, don't match their pace. Lower yours, talk slower, breathe deeper. That alone sets a different rhythm. Second, keep your tone low. Volume doesn't equal authority, presence does. Third, choose your words carefully. Don't throw kerosene on the fire. Throw water. Now, some people confuse calm with silence. They think calm means saying nothing at all. Not true. Calm still speaks, but it speaks steady. Calm still addresses the issue, but without flames. You can be firm without being fiery, and here's something important. Calm isn't just for them, it's for you. When you keep your calm, you keep your power. The moment you let anger drive, you hand the reins over to the other person. But when you stay calm, you're the one holding steady in the saddle, no matter how wild the horse bucks. I remember a fight I had years ago with a close friend. He came at me hot red in the face, words sharp as barbed wire. Everything in me wanted to strike back, but I held my tongue, stayed calm, listened, and after a while he ran out of steam. His anger burned down to coals, and for the first time he really talked about what was bothering him. If I'd matched his fire with fire, we might not still be friends today. That's the power of calm. So next time conflict rolls in like thunder, remember this: anybody can add noise to the storm. Anybody can raise their voice and spread the chaos. But it takes strength to be the steady hand, the calm in the middle of the dust, and that's the kind of strength people remember. That's the kind of strength that turns conflict into connection. 6. Choose connection over winning. I knew a fellow once who could argue just about anybody. Sharp mind, quick tongue, always had a comeback ready. He prided himself on never losing a fight. Folks might have walked away quiet, but they didn't walk away closer. Truth is, he won a lot of arguments but lost a lot of relationships. And in the end, he realized those victories weren't worth near as much as he thought. See, winning feels good for a minute, but connection lasts for a lifetime. When conflict shows up, the temptation is strong. Prove you're right, land the last word, make sure they know you won. But here's the problem: if winning costs you the relationship, you haven't won at all. You've just traded something precious for something cheap. Think about it like this. You can win a fistfight with your neighbor over a boundary line, but you'll spend the next 10 years avoiding each other at the feed store. You can win an argument with your spouse, but what good is being right if you're sleeping back to back in silence? You can crush your kid in a debate, but what does it profit you if they stop opening up to you altogether? Winning the moment often loses the man. Connection is what keeps the bond strong. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times to stand firm, times when truth matters more than peace, but most of the conflicts we face aren't about truth so much as they're about pride. They're not life and death battles. They're bruised egos, misunderstandings, small grievances that swell into big ones because nobody wants to back down. That's where choosing connection makes all the difference. I've seen old married couples model this beautifully. They don't sweat the little fights. They'd rather stay close than be crowned right. One of them will shrug and say, "You know what, maybe you're right," and then they laugh, pour another cup of coffee, and move on. That's wisdom right there. They value the bond more than the victory. Here's a picture for you. Imagine two folks pulling on opposite ends of a rope in a tug-of war. That rope is the issue. Each person digs in their heels, straining, sweating, trying to yank the other across the line. But the rope just frays tighter between them. Now imagine one person lets go of the rope, not out of weakness, but out of choice. Suddenly, the tension breaks, the fight stops. Now both can look at the rope together without it being a weapon. That's connection over winning. It takes humility. It takes being willing to lose the little battle in order to win the bigger prize. Trust, respect, relationship, and humility's not easy. Pride whispers if you let go, you'll look weak. But the truth is, it's the strongest folks I've ever known who can walk away from being right for the sake of being close. So how do you do it? Next time you're knee-deep in conflict, ask yourself one question. Do I want to win the argument, or do I want to win the relationship? That one question will clear the fog quick. Choosing connection doesn't mean you never speak your truth. It just means you speak it with care. You lay it down without stabbing. You hold it lightly enough that the other person still feels valued, even if they don't agree. That's the sweet spot, honesty without hostility. I remember a buddy of mine told me once, I'd rather sit around a fire with someone who disagrees with me but respects me than with someone who agrees with me but despises me. That stuck with me. Connection outlives agreement. At the end of the day, relationships are what life's made of. Not arguments, not trophies for being right, relationships. And if you spend your life winning every conflict but standing alone at the end, you've missed the point. So here's the challenge. Next time conflict comes, loosen your grip on being right. Choose the bond over the bragging rights, because winning fades quick, but connection builds a legacy, and that legacy is worth more than any argument you'll ever win. Turning conflict into connection. I've spent a lot of words talking about conflict, but here's the plain truth. Conflict ain't going away. As long as there are people, there'll be disagreements. As long as there are families, there'll be fights. As long as there are neighbors, co-workers, husbands, wives, kids, there'll be sparks. You can't avoid it, but you can decide what you're gonna do with it. Conflict can be a fire that burns everything down, or it can be a forge that shapes something stronger. The difference ain't the fire, it's how you handle it. We've walked through 6 ways to handle it better. We talked about the pause because sometimes 5 seconds of silence saves 5 years of regret. We talked about listening to understand because folks don't need your defense near as much as they need your ears. We talked about shifting from me vs. you to us vs. the problem because the hole in the fence don't care whose fault it is. It just needs fixing. We talked about validation, seeing the other person's feelings without having to sign off on them. Respect first, answers later. We talked about leading with calm, not chaos, because calm is steady, calm carries weight, and calm changes the room. And we talked about choosing connection over winning because you can win the argument and still lose the relationship. And that's no kind of victory at all. All of these boil down to one simple thing. Conflict doesn't have to be the end of a relationship. It can be the beginning of a deeper one. You don't need to be perfect at this. Nobody is. I've failed plenty of times, snapped too quick, defended too fast, raised my voice when I should have lowered it. But every time I choose one of these paths, the pause, the listening, the calm, the connection, I watch something shift, walls drop, trust grows, bonds tighten. At the end of the day, when the dust settles on your life, folks won't remember all the times you were right. They'll remember how you treated them when things got hard. They'll remember if you listened. They'll remember if you stayed steady. They'll remember if you chose them over your pride. Conflict is gonna come. That's guaranteed, but the legacy you leave, that's up to you. So here's my challenge. Next time the sparks fly, don't aim to win the fight. Aim to win the person. Don't turn your back. Don't tear him down. Don't add noise to the storm. Instead, take the reins, steady your hands, breathe deep, and turn that conflict into connection. Because connection, real, honest, lasting connection, is worth more than being right. It's worth more than pride. It's worth everything.